Coming up on This Week in Space, NASA's Escapade mission to Mars is getting closer to launch. Where is the Dream Chaser spaceplane and when does it go to the ISS? And we're all about Artemis II when our special guest clues us in about what NASA's plans are, when they're going to fly, and what the astronauts will do when they get there. Check it out.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is This Week in Space, episode number 179, recorded on September 26, 2025. The new crew of Artemis II. Hello and welcome to another episode of This Week in Space, the new crew edition. I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief at astromagazine.com, and I'm here with the one, the only, the inimitable Tariq Malik, editor-in-chief for space.com. Good day, sir.
Oh, that's Tariq. J. Malik to you, Rod. Good day. Good day. It's good to be
I'll
back.
just call you TJ. In just a few minutes, we'll be joined by Tariq's associate, Josh Dinner, who's a thought or friend of Tariq. And he's another space.com news ace and a heck of a nice guy. So I'm looking forward to that. Before we start, however, I'm looking forward to you guys doing us a solid and going to your favorite podcatcher, whatever you use to listen to, and giving us reviews. We'll take 5 anythings, 5 thumbs, 5 rockets, 5 stars. Things I probably shouldn't mention on the air. 5 of anything will do. Because we're going to earn these 5 stars from you by having another joke from Tucker Drake.
Tucker!
Hey, Tariq.
Yes, Rod.
You know how in science fiction starships are often powered by things like antimatter and dark matter?
Yes.
Well, scientists have discovered a new form of matter that they're certain will be powering all kinds of starships in the increasingly dystopian and Gen Z sci-fi future. They're calling it doesn't matter.
Oh, so sad. That's new.
Right.
Is that new? Yeah.
Yeah, that is. Now, I want to apologize to Tucker because I added the dystopia Gen Z part, but I just thought it needed a little extra punch. Speaking of punching, I've heard that some people want to see us turn to displatter matter when it's joke time in the show. But don't do that, because you can help us by sending us your best space joke, or any space joke for that matter. But don't just type in, 101 funniest space jokes, because frankly, I've already mined the internet and I've got all the old Bennett surf space jokes there are. And most of them are pretty, what do astronauts eat? Asteroids and milk. I mean, there's just some really terrible stuff out there. But think up your own, be original, or use really good AI. Yeah. Although I have noticed AI's humor is miserable. But the stuff doesn't even make sense half the time.
Well, how would you like being trapped in a box with only your thoughts to yourself, right? And waiting on the hand of whatever human asks you a question.
Am I not?
Oh, yeah, here we are.
Yeah. I mean, think of my lifestyle. Yeah.
Trying to get out of this box. So,
boy.
By the way, if the people don't like the jokes, man, send us your own jokes, man, because Rod is a one-man band when it comes to finding all this stuff. So,
yeah. Poor me. And a brief announcement. I am in Huntsville, Alabama, as you can see by the different background. And I will be speaking tomorrow on September 27th. So that's tomorrow, depending on when you're looking at this episode, or today, or last week, at the annual Von Braun Astronomical Society's Astronomy Day 2025.
That's right. It's Astronomy Day.
Monte Sano State Park, and the event is free to the public. So I guess I am too. So if you are there and happen to spot me, and hard to miss, stop by and say hi. But now it's time for Headline News.
Chicken.
Headline news.
Headline news. Speaking of AI, right?
Can't stop yourself, can you?
Nope.
All right. First story: Matrix madness. So the European Space Agency's Euclid consortium just released the largest simulation of the universe to date, which is kind of a mind bender. And here we thought the Minecraft one was pretty impressive, but this contains 3.4 billion digital galaxies. And this is interesting, tracks gravitational interactions of 4 trillion particles.
Yeah.
How many particles are there in the universe, do we estimate?
Well, apparently at least 4 trillion.
More than 4 trillion.
Yeah, this is called Flagship 2. It's a simulation that uses an algorithm that designed by astrophysicist Joachim Stadel. I think I pronounced that right, at the University of Zurich. And then they use a supercomputer called, I think it's called PIZ-DAINT. I think I'm saying that right, which was the third most powerful computer in the world in 2019. And they use this to create a simulation of the universe based on the data they have to date, so that they can understand the sheer onslaught of the Euclid Space Telescope's data when they're going to do a big offload in the future. They want to make sure that they have an idea of what to expect before Euclid finishes its mission, because Euclid has been mapping billions of galaxies across the universe since 2023, and it will eventually cover like 30% of the entire sky, which, given the vastness of the universe, just seems absolutely daunting of a job. And so what they want to do is use this Flagship 2 model to say, okay, this is what we think we're going to see, so that we can prepare our processing and our data analysis tools for such a vast amount of data in order to reduce the amount of processing and cleanup times, so that they can speed up the science. Because you're going to get, imagine if you went shopping for your groceries, and you took, a plastic bag, but it turns out that your shopping returns something like a truckload of stuff. You're not going to fit it in that plastic bag. This type of thing will prepare the systems that they need to accept and be ready for that, truckload of billions and trillions and of particles and stuff that this Euclid Space Telescope has been mapping.
That sounds like a big job.
Yeah.
All right, next up, the Escapade begins. Yes.
I was just going to say that it also helps them infer things about like the models that we understand for our universe, and they think that the simulations that they're seeing are already showing some signs that standard model of how we think the universe works may not be able to solve all of it, and the Euclid data, the real data is going to be where the rubber meets the road for that.
So the irony of this for the conspiracy believers is it's a simulation within a simulation.
Isn't that where we all live? Right?
Of course. So in other news, the Escapade begins.
Escapade!
Rocket Lab built 2 Escapade spacecraft, which is cool. That's the first time it's been done that way, under, I assume, what were fixed price contracts. They've arrived at Cape at the Kennedy Space Center and will be launched to Mars on a New Glenn rocket. What?
Were you going to say Cape Kennedy? Is that what you were going to say?
I almost did.
I know. I could tell.
That's my boomer showing through. And Escapade is short because NASA loves them, their acronyms, for the Escape and Plasma Acceleration Dynamic Explorers, which will be going to Mars to kind of like MAVEN, to measure the loss of atmosphere and the impact of solar wind on the Martian atmosphere and how it's being basically destroyed on an ongoing basis. The most interesting thing about this mission, besides Rocket Lab's involvement, is that it's coming in at $80 million. Now, I don't think that includes launch costs. That's got to be just program costs. But that's about the same price as India's Mars orbiter mission, which is really inexpensive. So if this works, this is a whole new ball game for American robotic space exploration.
It'll be very interesting. Now, Rocket Lab is, this is going to be their first interplanetary mission, and they're not sending one, but as you mentioned, 2 different probes. And Escapade is interesting because it's going to study I believe it's going to study like the atmosphere of Mars and understand like how hopefully the whole planet evolved over time and where the water went through this plasma escape from the upper atmosphere. Did we talk about the acronym again? You said it out, right? Yeah. Yeah. But they actually have separate names too. They're called Blue and Gold for their
UCLA's colors.
I'm not gonna say anything because I get to celebrate some USC astronauts later. So anyway, but the really interesting part about this is that they are finally in Florida. This is a mission that was supposed to launch last year. almost a year ago as we're recording this in the fall of 2024. And now finally it's ready to go because we've been waiting for the New Glenn rocket to be ready for it. So as of now, we're thinking that it's going to launch. We actually got an update today from Blue Origin that they think that New Glenn's going to be ready for about a mid-October mid-month launch as we're, it's the end of September right now as we're recording this. So we have a good idea of when it's going to be ready. But this arrival of the spacecraft to Florida is a pivotal point because it says that now the campaign is in earnest only a few weeks, maybe like a month away.
Fabulous.
Yeah, I want Rocket Lab to go to Venus. I talked to Peter Beck about that a lot, but he told me last month that this mission, in particular Escapade, is going to be very key for them to prove out their concepts because they want to build the Mars telecommunications orbiter for NASA, and they've got their sights set on Mars sample return possibly as well.
Well, their original idea for Venus was they were going to launch that themselves, right?
Yeah, but now, with actual contracts where people want to pay money to go to another planet, you can see that might be a little bit more attractive.
Yeah,
exactly.
And finally, where's Dream Chaser? We've got a Where's Waldo moment here.
Yeah, this story, those last two were from space.com. This one's from Ars.Technica, but you can also find our case on it too. But as Eric Berger over at Ars said, by the way, I saw him this week in person. It was great to see him again. NASA has changed their plan for Sierra Nevada's Dream Chaser. It was one of course, 3 cargo delivery options that NASA had picked when they did a cargo delivery update for contracts. SpaceX and Northrop Grumman were the others with the Dragon and the Cygnus vehicle. And Dream Chaser was Sierra Nevada's entry, but the first flight, we've been waiting for the first flight of their Tenacity spaceplane for quite some time. This is unlike SpaceX and Northrop Grumman, Dream Chaser is a capsule, is a space plane.
It's a lifting body.
It's like a lifting body, the HL-20s inspired lifting body that can land in a typical commercial runway, which gives them a lot more deorbit and options, and maybe even more mission options so that you can pick where you want to go. And their initial plan was to use it to fly cargo to the space station. I believe they've sold a UN mission to fly experiments and science for the United Nations on their first flight. And I think it's also going to launch on New Glenn. We were just talking about that. But in a new announcement this week, Dana Weigel, manager of the ISS program at NASA, says that that they're going to, they aren't going to hold Sierra Nevada to their initial, I think it was like 7 cargo flights to the space station, because right now it's 2025 and the space station is supposed to be deorbited in 2030, and they don't think that they're going to be able to fit all those flights into that period. So they're going to say that, if they're ready to go, yes, they'll take them. But then also, if they don't full out the whole contract, that's also okay.
Well, we just want to see them fly whenever and however they can.
I've been inside one of the test vehicles of that, and I remember feeling really interesting because it felt small but also big in terms of a capsule, because it's this long pressurized tube of pressurized material rather than being like a little box like a capsule would be. So
cool. All right. We will be back with Space.com's Josh Dinner to talk about all the new NASA astronauts, the Artemis II crews. So go nowhere. And we are back with Josh Dinner, a space reporter for Space.com. Hello, Josh.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Then you and my pal Tariq had an adventure this week.
Yeah, we certainly did.
Okay, yes, I'll expound. No, yeah, we went to Houston.
Tariq, how are you?
Tell
us all about it.
Yeah, we went to the Johnson Space Center this week for like a bit of a twofer. We saw NASA unveil a new astronaut class. We're going to talk about that later, but a bit more front and center. It was like Artemis II Palooza all the time in Houston, and it was spectacular. But we should probably talk about who Josh is before we get into that, right?
Well, we want to know not just who Josh is, but who Josh was when he became fascinated about space, because that's always your big question.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So yeah, Josh, sorry that I forgot to tell you about this. We throw you into the fire, but
That's okay.
But yeah, one of the big questions that we have, so, we did the short intro. You were the spaceflight reporter with Mike Wall at space.com. And my partner in crime, he was the chauffeur too. Josh drove us around when we were in Houston. But how did you get...
Chauffeur, show tune singer, space writer. What doesn't he do?
I know, right?
Don't worry, there's plenty.
but Josh, can you kind of give people an idea about how you got interested and involved in space in general? Is it something that you've liked since you were like a little kid? You were talking offline that you had a very different kind of, I want to say, professional focus before you landed at space.com. If you can share that path, thanks.
Indeed, I did. So I would say my love for space, I think can be traced back to about before I was a person, or at least had formed as a person. My earliest memory.
He said before he was a person.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, no, we all grow into ourselves. My earliest memory is watching Star Trek: The Next Generation with my dad, and so that was sort of just growing up the maybe the foundation of why I love space so much. But I was very fascinated. Like many, I wanted to be an astronaut growing up. My path did take me a very different direction, though. I was, for many years of my professional life starting out, I was a cantor at a synagogue. So I was the one singing the music next to the rabbi up on during services on Shabbat.
Your mom, the rabbi, was it your mom was the rabbi or a different rabbi?
No, my mom is a rabbi. She's retired now. But no, I did not work at my mom's synagogue. That would have been maybe a little much for me.
And so how do you get from that to space?
So I, like a few other reporters I know, went to a NASA social where, NASA invites social media users to come to a launch or a space event and tweet it and hope that their followers get more interested in NASA too. Is
this when they called it the tweet ups, when they used to still call it that?
No, it was post tweet up days. It was NASA social. I think it had been NASA social for maybe like a year.
Okay.
And I saw my first rocket launch, and for the same reason I loved Jewish music, music has this very powerful way of bringing people together. And when you're singing in a different language, a lot of people don't always know, in this instance, in Judaism, it's Hebrew. A lot of less religious Jews just don't always understand the Hebrew. And when you're singing in a language that you don't necessarily understand all of, it can mean whatever you need it to mean. And it creates this moment that just like binds people together as under a common cause. And that really drew me to Jewish music. And I saw my first rocket launch go up, and my brain instantly thought, think of all the people who had to come together to build this rocket, design the payload, which was a science payload. It was the Magnetic Multiscale mission, a mission that went to study solar wind around Earth in the magnetosphere. All the people that had to figure out, how are we going to make these science machines work? What are we going to do with this data? What questions are we answering? And that spoke to me on as deep a level. And I instantly said, I need to become a space reporter. And so I did.
What was the launch vehicle for that? Was that an Atlas V?
Atlas V.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, look at that. I still remember my
Those are nice and loud. They're fun.
I have still not seen an Atlas V launch. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I guess let's talk about the big thing. Do you want to go, Rod, or shall I just jump right into it?
Go for it.
All right. Well,
because you were there.
Yeah.
You got invited, and you have a travel budget. I always whine about this, don't I?
Well, you know what? Maybe, Rod, we can build you into our coverage, and then we can take you along with us for Artemis II. Because now we know when it's going to launch. Before this press conference, to lay it all out there, NASA had 3 days of press conferences. The first day on Monday of this week, as we're recording, was the NASA astronaut reveal. We're going to talk about that later. Day one of Artemis was on Tuesday. That was like the mission overview, science briefings, a lot of round robins, that kind of thing. Day two was the crew. That's what a lot of people showed up for. And what we found out on day one was that the actual opening, the technical opening of launch window, this is something that we had heard about in the past, but it wasn't like officially stated, is February 5th. So that is the opening, no earlier than February 5th. And it's only for like 4 or 5 days in February. So the 5th to the 10th. And then there's another like kind of similar 4 or 5 day window in March. And then there's one last one in April, at the end of April, that ends on April 26th. And you know what that means, Rod? That means that now there is like a very slight chance that Artemis II could launch on my birthday. And wouldn't that be awesome?
And that is the most important consideration.
It is. You know, I wrote a memo to NASA about it. But that was really exciting. And I think, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't they say that like most of like the February and March attempts were going to be like nighttime launches? Is that right?
Yeah, I do think that was the case.
Yeah.
With the first 2 attempt windows.
And wasn't Artemis 1 a nighttime launch too? Eventually?
It was a very late nighttime launch. I think it took place somewhere between midnight and 4 a.m., but I don't remember specifically.
Oh my gosh! So it's nice to have that window. I think, at least for an editor to help plan, but for all of you out there listening, to be able to kind of map out what kind of hotel blocks you want to, maybe reserve, because those are going to go fast the minute they say these are what the windows are going to be, so.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks of, I don't remember which shuttle mission it was. I saw 3 shuttle launches, but the middle one I didn't actually see. I should say I attempted to see 3, because I went there with my kid, who was probably 8 or 10 at that point. And we waited, I think, 9 days.
9 days.
Sitting in the press center, waiting, didn't go, waiting. Come on, look at our watches. Don't even look at your watch. Just look at the date and see it flip to the next day. It was so frustrating. Hydrogen leaks, blah, 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 blah. And that was a well-proven system at that point. So we waited, and finally we saw that was the Atlas launch I saw. And then we drove down to the Keys and had a vacation, because clearly the shuttle wasn't going anywhere. I think it launched 2 weeks later or something. But I hope SLS, I mean, it is the first crewed flight of this thing. So we all have to bear that in mind.
No, go ahead, Josh. It sounds a lot like the Artemis 1 when it actually did get off the ground. We were there for quite a while, and it stood out through a hurricane during that window. And I was shocked that it launched after a hurricane. But yeah, that was a long stretch of time, maybe the longest of the campaign.
Were you on staff for Artemis 1 in November of 2022? I don't.
Not
no. So you were there freelance taking photos for us and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I was there I was with our managing editor, Brett.
Brett Tingley got to go to that. I went out for the first 2 times, like you were saying, Rod, and it did not get off the ground. But 9 days, I have to say, pshaw, because my first space shuttle launch, STS-114, the return to flight, I was down there for 14 days waiting for them to get off the ground, and then they finally did on like the 15th or 16th day. So, but the crew made a little bit of extra news on and for these Artemis II days too. They actually named the Orion spacecraft. Josh, you want to kind of explain what they picked and why they did that?
Yeah, they picked integrity. It's tradition for the first crew of a spacecraft, and probably other vessels, terrestrial vessels as well. I'm not entirely sure, but for spacecraft, the first crew gets to pick the name, and they picked integrity. And they said because they wanted to promote, I think it was peace and love for all mankind. I don't remember what their phrasing was specifically, but they're I think, they stated their goal as wanting to bring people together and doing so with a purpose. Oh yeah, there it is. Integrity.
It's not clear to me if they're going to like stamp the name on the Orion spacecraft, or if everyone gets to name their Orion separately, because parts of this Orion have actually flown before. Some of the avionics boxes and whatnot, they pulled them off Artemis 1 and put them into this one. When I spoke to Deborah Korth, the deputy program manager of this Orion program, she did say that they want to kind of reuse more and more and more of the Orion capsules to the point where you get to maybe one that is mostly reusable. SpaceX they have like what, about 4 or 5 active.
5.
I think they have 5. Yeah.
Yeah. But they named them one time and then they keep that name forever. So
it only matters for launch. So I'd say you just go to Amazon and print a bumper sticker and put it over the hatch. I was kind of hoping for Intrepid or Defiant or a nice ship of the line kind of name. Integrity. I heard that. It's kind of like, and I apologize in advance, but it's like, did some insurance actuary name this thing? Why did they put that name? But I think
integrity is extremely important on a couple of things. First, you want to make sure that everyone is working with integrity, right? But you also want to make sure that your ship has integrity to keep them alive on the first mission around the moon in 53 years. Did I do the math right? Of the 21st century, right?
Longer than that.
Crickets.
Talk about lunar flight.
We're all just trying to do the math.
I know.
Yeah, right. And that's why we're reporters, right?
Oh man.
By the way, Josh, did you finish your calculus sequence in college or high school?
No.
Yeah.
No, I did pre-calc. I did pre-calc in high school, and then I think they called it finite math. It was the one class in undergrad that I had to take, the one math class I had to take, and boy, it was a struggle.
He did not have to take differential equations. So,
we may have taken it, but it didn't take us. So.
Or we didn't take to it, right?
So, can you guys talk a little bit about the crew?
Yeah, Josh, do you want to go first on the crew, or go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, we can run through the crew. There's the crew commander, Reed Weissman, pilot Victor Glover, mission specialist Christina Koch, and other mission specialist Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen. They seem very cohesive. I was very impressed with, their camaraderie during the press briefing and other instances where I've seen them. They seem like a very solid crew. And I think one might expect that of any NASA crew. But they seem like some pretty genuine friends who are really excited for the journey they get to go on together.
Yeah, and there is a lot of experience, Rod, for this mission. You've got Reed Wiseman, former NASA chief astronaut and an ISS crew member, about 165 days in space. You've got Vic Glover, Crew 1 pilot, now going to be the first pilot to fly around the moon. Reed Wiseman is the commander. Vic Glover is the pilot for Artemis II. Who spent 168 days and has done a number of spacewalks. I think Reed did 1 or 2, but Vic did a few more on the space station. Then you have Christina Koch, record-setting astronaut, over 360 days in space, if I got that right, or 340 days.
Right.
I don't remember the exact number, but it was long because they extended her flight when she was up there, and so she has the most space flight time in between, and she is not a military pilot like Reed Wiseman or Vic Glover. She's kind of a scientist at heart. She did a lot of science, and she talked a lot about the science of the mission that they're going to be able to do on this flight, even though they're not going to land. They're not even going to get very close to the moon. I was surprised to hear. We'll talk about that in a bit. But then you have Jeremy Hansen of the Canadian Space Agency. Jeremy, who has been an astronaut for quite some time, but has never flown in space. His first mission is around the moon, which just seems crazy, given the level of experience of the rest. But you can see that that's like an investment too about this next generation of astronauts who will need this lunar experience to get there. And then you have that international cooperation part of the flight too. He kind of seemed to be very self-conscious because he seems to be the tallest of all of the astronauts on the flight.
Seems to be. He's like 2 feet taller than everybody else.
Well, and it's interesting, you're talking about rookies and flight experience and so forth. When you think about Apollo 8, which was the first Apollo flight to leave Earth orbit and orbit the moon, as opposed to a flyby, but I rest my case. You had Frank Borman and Jim Lovell, who had spent 14 days in a Gemini capsule. We've talked about that a lot on this show. I can't imagine. It's like sitting in the smallest Toyota you can buy for 2 weeks. But, so they had that experience. But Anders had, at that point, just a couple of days. Had he even flown? I think he had flown a Gemini flight. But these guys, most of the Apollo astronauts, they had days in space, max. So, compared to this crew, they really had nothing.
Months.
Yeah.
And it is interesting.
We should different ball game.
Yeah. Do you want to run through, Josh, kind of like the length of this mission compared to like those ISS flights? Because we've been talking about months and months and months.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah. So kind of give everyone like the snapshot picture of what this mission is like in terms of the timeline.
So they are doing what's called a free trajectory return flight around the moon. Like you said, Rod, they're not going to be orbiting the moon. They're just going to be kind of slingshotting around. But they're not going straight there, really. They're going to launch into Earth orbit. They're going to be doing some maneuvers, like close quarters maneuvers with their the interstage, the cryogenic fuel interstage that puts them in orbit and will be pushing them toward the moon. Or no, sorry. Separating them before they get pushed to the moon by their command module. And they're going to spend, I think, the first 2 days in Earth orbit before the translunar injection burn. We've got a map.
Here's a fun map of all the stages. Yeah.
Yeah, just try and read that.
And then it's a few days to the moon, and they told us during the briefings that from the perspective of the astronauts out the window of the spacecraft, they're going to be about close enough that the moon appears to be the size. They kept comparing it to a basketball that you hold out with your arm extended. Yeah. So if you look at a basketball an arm's length away, that's about how big the moon will look to them. And their slingshot is actually their closest approach to the moon does not actually last relatively long compared to the length of their what's fully 10 days of a mission. The closest approach with the far side of the moon is going to last only 3 hours. And then they are slungshot back toward Earth, which is designed so, if anything goes wrong once they're on their way to the moon, this free return trajectory guarantees they're going to return back to Earth no matter what, because that's where the spacecraft is headed. So they'll be returning back to Earth for another couple days, and then as they approach, they'll disconnect the Orion capsule from its service module, flip it around so the heat shield faces the planet and the atmosphere, and have a nice parachuted down landing in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego.
And I think NASA, they said they want to try to get them out of the water within a couple hours, I think is the goal.
They want to get very quickly. There are several experiments that they want the crew, and exercises they want the crew to perform right at the end of their mission once they get out of their spacecraft, so they can best measure how the body has responded to really every stage of the mission, and to simulate future efforts that may need to be taken by crews who are going to be landing not on Earth, will be landing on the moon, and they need to be capable of performing certain actions, and they want to measure the capability of the crew to test those capabilities out.
So this is interesting. If I read this correctly, their closest approach is going to be well over 6,000 miles.
Oh, yeah.
And the Apollo 8 orbit and all the Apollo orbits basically were at 60 miles. So this is a very distant view in comparison.
Yeah. And in fact, the astronauts and the scientists that are on this mission don't really know exactly how far away they're going to be from the moon. As we heard this week, depending on the day of the translunar injection burn, because that's the burn that sets up not just the lunar rendezvous, but also their landing. Depending on that day, they could be as close as 5,000 miles. They could be as far away as 9,000 miles. So depending on the day, they could actually beat the Apollo 13 record of the furthest from the Earth of any human on the planet, of any space mission ever. And so, but it really depends, because, on some days they'll be closer, and on other days they're going to be farther. And that's why you only have those kind of slim 5-day windows per month leading into to April before they have to reset for the position of the moon in the future.
Another thing that sets this apart from the Apollo missions, which I find really interesting, is that, to my memory, Apollo pretty much launched so that the crews were on our side, the Earth side of the moon, and so the sun was on the Earth side of the moon. For the Artemis II fly around the moon, much of the far side of the moon will be illuminated, and they will be able to witness with their own eyes, views that no human has ever really seen before. And they talked about that a little bit in the crew briefing, about how the most reliable scientific instrument is the human eyes, because we spot things quicker than, a camera can or a computer can, and we can differentiate things more intuitively. And I think that's really exciting. I mean, obviously it's exciting for the crew to get to go to the moon and look at it at all. But to be able to use that as a scientific measurement and find out what, geological things they might discover, what other space things they might discover, it's a very, I think, important and crucial part of the mission that we haven't been able to do before.
Well, we're going to slingshot ourselves into a free return trajectory as we go past this first break. So stand by. We'll be right back. So just to recap, we've got 3 sets of launch windows, weeks apart. Did I get that right?
Yeah, February, March, and April. Yeah.
Okay.
There might be more, but in April, because it's the end of the month. But we know that there's 1 week, several days each month leading up into April, and then they said that the last day was April 26th. So,
well, that does make it hard to book your hotel suite, doesn't it?
Yeah,
because we're going to have a party suite, right?
Well, or maybe we should just get an RV, because then we can just all pile into it and go to Houston, right?
Yeah, but it'd smell like guys by the time we got there.
There's one thing about that I wanted to bring up, because this was very interesting that we had heard kind of on the background, and that was the way that NASA is going to treat this mission, as opposed to maybe what a lot of our listeners and viewers are used to seeing with the most recent crewed launches since 2020. That's the SpaceX and the Starliner launch, where they launched into space, and then that was kind of the end of the coverage, and until it was time for them to come back to Earth. And we kind of got a picture of NASA returning to that space shuttle mission model, where you don't just get the launch coverage and then it's up there and then you wait for like the big mission events. It sounds like it's going to be like a continuous event, like you would want for this first return to the moon, but hopefully not the last, where you've got live mission updates from the flight controllers every day, with press conferences about what they've done, how the spacecraft is going, and that's going to be very interesting to see. And I'm going to have to flex some very old muscles, Rod, from my shuttle days, to make sure that we're getting the story out to everybody out there, because the mission time will be different from like standard daytime and nighttime. You follow that astronaut schedule, whether or not you're in space or on the ground. And so your day can start in the middle of the night. It can start in the afternoon. It can start in a regular time, but we don't know yet until they actually get off the ground.
So can I grind on a boomer moment for just a second?
Okay, Boomer, go ahead.
I know I've complained about this before, but by Apollo 14, when we had seen people walk on the moon, we had the astronaut emergency in Apollo 13. By the time they landed on the moon, all the media editors knew that there wasn't going to be an emergency, or if there was, it wouldn't be till they were going to lift off from the moon. So they just cut the coverage. So those guys were walking around. They were starting to head off towards Cone Crater. And boom, we're back to Days of Our Lives in General Hospital soap operas. And I was a kid, but I was like, you got to be kidding me. The greatest achievement of Western civilization in thousands of years is happening on the moon, and you're going to make me watch a soap opera. And it was just shameful. So at least now there's a lot more venues. If there is anything coming out of NASA, we'll be able to see it, which is great.
Well, let's ask Josh, because Josh is kind of the younger set. What, a millennial, Josh?
Yes, I am a millennial. That's correct.
Yeah. So I think I'm like on the tail end of Generation X. I don't know. I like to think about that, but do you think
you're mid-elderly now?
Do you? I'm not 50 yet. Do you think, Josh, that this mission will command the appropriate level of public dedication or fervor based on what you saw for Artemis I, or what you as like a digital plugged-in member of your generation would expect?
That's kind of a landmine question, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm not trying to be like ageist, right? Because that'll get me called up by HR. But I'm very curious, right, about where things are. Because like you said, Rod, there's like a bajillion different channels now.
Yeah.
Not just on TV, but like on the computer, on our phones. NASA's going to have like their own stream. Everyone's going to have their own live stream.
Yeah.
But is that enough to really catapult this? Based on what we saw. So.
Unfortunately, honestly, I think the answer is No, I don't.
Oh my God! I was not expecting that.
I don't think that the mission will get the coverage that it is warranted. I don't think that it'll get the coverage that it deserves. And by coverage, I don't mean, we're obviously going to cover it. Everyone will cover it. It's maybe the biggest news of the millennium so far. But I think there's a lot of things that pull people away from interest in space sometimes.
Wow.
Just like in 1968, we are facing a lot of societal problems.
Boy, the parallels are pretty staggering, aren't they?
They very much are.
Yeah.
And it would thrill me to no end to have a comparison follow through to the end of Artemis II with Apollo 8, where the perception is that, Artemis II saved the generation or saved the year, just like they say Apollo 8 saved 1968.
Right.
I also think there's another side to it, which is we have become technologically so good at creating things like sci-fi movies that give us this visual perception of things we have, only been able to imagine, and we can just make it into a movie. So space flight, aliens, interdimensional travel, all of it is something that we have, a visual cue for, thanks to CGI and movie magic. And I think there's a chance that actually seeing astronauts on the moon, despite its historic impact and very real significance, will be lost on people who say, oh, well, we already did that. Like I can go watch Apollo 13. It looks exactly like this and in HD. And while this is not my hope, and I obviously hope that the mission snowballs into this giant frenzy of society that we can't take our eyes away. But I do think there are some significant barriers to that, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's very interesting.
Okay, so
go ahead.
Charge to our audience. If you know any major influencers, call them in and let's get them looking at this. Is Cardi B an influencer? A name pops into my head. Kardashians, anybody, get the influencers on here going, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen because they're astronauts flying around the sun, whatever it is they're going to do.
The space influencers are really trying.
I know. It's just a smaller audience than the general public.
It will be interesting to see how NASA treats that outreach of this mission, given that this is like the first one of the 21st century, the first one where social media is a thing. And they've shown themselves to be very savvy about all of that. One thing that I was really struck by in our discussions, we got tours of mission control, a lot of the back rooms for lunar science, for Orion operations. And I was really struck by how many, I think there was only one flight controller that we spoke with who was alive when Apollo 11 landed on the moon. He was 4, he said, when that happened. Everyone else in their early to mid 30s, and each one of them, especially the ones that are going to be like leads in mission control, FIDO and ECOM, said that this is like their Apollo moment. And one of the things that they felt was really interesting is when they hit a snag, they could call some of those older Apollo engineers to get some input and then push on through.
So let's circle back to that. But first, we have to pay attention to our sponsors. So we'll be right back after this break. Stand by. So I just want to say about mission control. We discussed this before, but it comes to mind because I'm working on a book that involves people from mission control from Apollo. Don't forget the average age of a mission control console guy during Apollo is 26.
Younger than these people.
22, 23.
These people were not far off. A little older, the ones we spoke to, but that range.
And when I asked Gene Kranz why they use such young people, well, there's a couple of reasons. One is nobody had really done this before, so it didn't matter if they were older because the only thing they had done, they had people that had tracked rocket launches for the Air Force and NASA's early stuff. But in general terms, this is all a pretty new field. But Gene, being Gene, said, and I wanted men that didn't know failure. And I thought, oh, that is so cool. It gives me shivers, But so what's the average age now, these controllers?
Well, for the ones that we spoke to, it was like in the mid 30s, early to mid 30s. But there was a bit of a mix, but it was a fairly young crew. Did you have a Thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, I don't remember I don't remember if we spoke to someone who was younger than 30, but I do remember that we didn't speak to someone who was older than 36.
So in mission control, in the Orion back rooms, that there was
except for maybe the flight director.
Yeah, the flight director is in his 40s, like I was, and then the lead for imagery was the gentleman who mentioned to us that he had watched Apollo 11, or maybe it was Apollo 17. It was one of the last ones, or it was one of the landing ones. So
I just want to think you guys to think about what we were doing in our early 20s and early 30s compared to being a flight director, because Apollo flight directors maxed out at, I think, 36. Chris Kraft was the old guy in the room at 39 or 40. And it just blows my mind because, I was barely responsible breathing adult when I was in my mid-30s.
I know, right?
How do you guys control a mission out to the moon and back? But at least they're not. And it's interesting, to me anyway, one of the other things of this mission, because they're not going into lunar orbit and they are on a free return, you don't have that single point of failure, which we had when you look back on Apollo 8 now, and you think about the fact that this thing had never been flown outside of Earth orbit. We had never gone out with life support systems to the moon and back for anything like that duration of time. We had flown in orbit that duration of time, which is why Gemini 7A flew for 14 days to test that duration, but never gone out that far. And the only way those guys were coming home is if that service module engine, the service propulsion system, fired up. One engine, two igniters, or not igniters, but two valve sets, because it was hypergolic fuels. But I mean, if that engine didn't fire, they were staying. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of thing that just drives engineers nuts, but they did it anyway. And, no lunar module on that mission. So it just boggles the mind that it worked as well as it did. And I wish these guys all the same success.
Well, yeah. And I think that is kind of NASA's go-to line to remind everyone who is criticizing them for why are they just looping around the moon. They're not even going to go into orbit on this one. And it's because they've packed a lot into this test. This is the first one with crew to the moon, but it's also the first Orion with crew as well. So all of those other early Apollo tests, they're all happening also on this flight. That first 25 hours are critical periods for this mission, because they have to make sure that the CO2 scrubbers are working the way that they think. That was not on Artemis 1. They have to make sure that the water system that lets them, stay hydrated and stay alive works. They have to make sure the toilet works. There's a toilet on this mission. It's in the floor, which is crazy, but it's built on ISS legacy experience, but you don't want that to malfunction so that they have to use bags the entire time. And then the dumping of that stuff overboard to make sure it doesn't shimmy too much with their trajectories, because Fido said that's going to change everything on this one compared to Artemis 1.
So you talk about like if they're venting urine or something.
Yeah, it'll change
a little rocket.
Exactly, and they'll have to make adjustments over time.
Yeah, we were talking to some of the engineers at Johnson, and of all they plan for as many situations and scenarios as they can in these missions, and they have a scenario where the crew, if there's a pressure issue or a life support issue. Tariq, help me with the number, but the crew ends up, they have the capability to be in their spacesuits.
Their spacesuits for 144 hours.
For 144 hours.
What is that? That's like 3 days, right? Inside a spacesuit. So
we're still waiting on the EVA suits. So these are just pressure suits, right?
Yeah. These are the Orion crew survival suits. They call them AUX, right? That's a pretty cool acronym. And this was my favorite thing. In fact, we should probably wrap up this part because I do want to talk about the new astronauts too. But my favorite thing about these media days was being able to talk to the engineers behind these suits, because they look very similar to the ACES suits, the Advanced Crew Escape suits that NASA used during the space shuttle mission, but they're built for deep space survival, right? And they'll launch in partial pressure so that they can move. They're bright orange for visibility. They have a lot of pockets. There's like a knife in one pocket. There's an oxygen bottle for spare oxygen in another. But as Josh said, they have the ability to be able to stay in these suits with that, with hooked up to oxygen, for 144 hours. There's little ports to get extra water or food in if they need it. There's a really complicated, and they had to explain it to me like 3 times, very complicated system where they strap devices on the front and the rear to be able to go to the bathroom in 144 days in space. And it sounds extremely complicated.
144 hours.
Or hours, yes. Not days. So that would be even worse. Oh my gosh. But yeah, 144 hours over time until they can restore things, and it was absolutely crazy. So
the engineers were very patient with all of our toilet questions.
Yes, because there weren't many.
Thorough.
Well, it beats using the top hat, as they used to say. Before we move on to the
top hat was the bag, everybody, that stuck to your butt.
The bag with the adhesive that had a little glove in it, so you could mix in the, the germicide.
Why do you got to wiggle your fingers, man?
Because that's what they had to do. When you listen to these guys talk about it, it's like, okay, tell me the detail. Oh, no, okay, don't tell me the details. Before we get into the next topic, though, was there discussion of the heat shield issues in this presser?
There was. Josh, do you want to talk about that?
Sure, I can. There was. Orion had some, they call it mechanical liberation from the heat shield during its atmospheric reentry during Artemis I. And that's been a really big concern. And one of the reasons the mission is next year instead of this year.
Right.
And rather than, I think, adjust the material and make of the heat shield, they determined that the issue was the trajectory they took back through the atmosphere. They took sort of a dip into the atmosphere during their return with Artemis I, which the angle and trajectory of which is what they found to have caused mechanical liberation. Pieces broke off.
Basically, its crap came off. Yeah.
Right. It ablated way too much. And so for Artemis II, they're skipping this skip off the atmosphere, which is adding extra stress to the vehicle, and taking a less stressful course through the atmosphere that shouldn't get the heat shield as hot for as long. And they seem very confident that this is the fix.
Yeah.
So the total amount of energy absorbed is the same. It's just lower heat over a longer period of time. Right?
Exactly. The way that they describe it is that they have built this heat shield to be porous, right? So that as it heats up and that plasma turns into gas and the ablation stuff vents out, that it vents out and maybe ablates in a way where you're not losing big chunks of the heat shield on the way down. But what they found with this really aggressive angle and approach, as Josh mentioned, is that the heating was faster than the gas kind of escape over time. And because because of that difference, then they had a pressure buildup inside the bottom layers of the heat shield that then would pop off the actual ablative material over time, because there was too much heat and for the off-gassing porous ability of the heat shield to accept. And so by doing this lower angle, less aggressive entry, they don't have to change the heat shield, but it will allow that pressure buildup to be avoided to the point where it shouldn't be popping off big chunks and pose a safety risk to the crew. And the astronauts, themselves said they were in that meeting when it was mentioned, and they understand what that risk is going to be, and they're accepting that as well. So
it's amazing how hard it is to do it all again, a half century later. All right, we have one more break to dip to, and then I want to come back and talk about the new astronauts.
Well, really quickly, Josh had a really funny thing about that he thought was his favorite. I just wanted to see if Josh can talk about that. Josh, you said it was the EVA training, right?
My favorite moment from our visit to JSC. Yeah, we got to see some EVA training, which is extravehicular activity. So the Artemis spacesuits that they're planning to have astronauts wear on the moon. We saw this. Basically, this person was rigged to. I don't know if it was a crane, but like a bungee on the ceiling, very complicated bungee that would simulate the lunar gravity. And they were using the various tools to scoop moon rocks and, take samples. And it was a very cool thing to get to see. They're already practicing for the mission that comes after this one. And making sure that, all of the tools have the right grip, that the spacesuit has the right sort of mobility. And, they were actively training while we were there. It was very cool to see.
Yeah. And just to that point, the Artemis II astronauts are going to have to do that. They're going to go on this 10-day mission and then come screaming back at Mach 39, splash down in the ocean at 15 miles an hour. When they recover them and take them out on the ship, they're going to make them try and unfold like a ladder and climb out of the capsule on their own as if there was an emergency, to see if they can still do that after like such an exertion of going to the moon and back. And then when they get to Houston, the next day, they're going to put them through this EVA training, make them put that big suit on and make sure that astronauts would be ready to go walk on the moon and collect all the samples, and then put them on a treadmill in that suit and make them run too, which just sounds awful after like a road trip. But, what are you going to do?
Wow. So the Apollo guys came back to go sit in quarantine for 3 weeks.
There you go.
They just gave them beer
you
and
got
a
to
newspaper.
stay safe from the moon germs.
Yeah. That turned out to be a wash. Okay, we're going to wash ourselves in another break. Stand by.
I guess I could have, I realized it while we were, after I talked about the heat shield, but I have a little Orion model here I pulled from just behind me. I could have
we could have had that the whole time.
Got to get a blowtorch. Okay, so when we come back, Tariq, you want to talk about the new, not yet. You want to talk about the new class, right?
Yeah, but let's keep it short because it's already at the end of the hour.
All right.
Great. Well, so now we're back. I think we've got a pretty good handle about Artemis II, but Josh, this was his first time at the Johnson Space Center, and his big story this week was that NASA's unveiling of some new astronauts. So Josh, can you kind of walk us through what happened the day before we got the Artemis II skinny?
Yeah, so Monday they had NASA very, leave it to the rocket scientists to schedule these back to back, so we didn't have to fly in twice. NASA announced a brand new class of astronaut candidates. Very exciting. We have 10 new individuals. I think it was 6 women and 4 men.
That's right.
All of very diverse backgrounds in terms of their career paths and skill sets. If NASA sticks to its current plan for Artemis and beyond, these astronauts could very well be the ones that are walking around Mars.
That's right.
Very exciting.
We've got video of them all coming out into their seats. There was a packed crowd of their family, their friends, a lot of NASA people. But just to run through who these new astronauts are, you've got Ben Bailey, a chief warrant officer in the U.S. Army from Charlottesville, Virginia. You've got Lauren Edgar. This is Mr. Kubo, Yuri Kubo from Columbus, Indiana. He's 40, and he actually plays ultimate frisbee and played competitively on the national stage. You've got Lauren Edgar from Washington. She's a geologist and a Mars rover scientist who is now going to be able to be probably one of the astronauts that walks on the moon while she's been looking for Artemis III science sites. You've got Adam Furman, a major in the U.S. Air Force from Virginia. Cameron Jones, another major in the Air Force. These are all test pilots. I mentioned Yuri Kubo, and he's actually like an electrical engineer who has worked at SpaceX and on Falcon 9 launches, and also worked in like energy and electric hydrogen industry, which was pretty interesting. Rebecca Lawler, I believe, is a U.S. Navy aviator, an experimental test pilot. You've got Anna Menon, and if that name sounds familiar, she's already flown in orbit. She was the SpaceX astronaut, one of the SpaceX astronauts on the Polaris Dawn mission. Also, I found out married to Anil Menon, the NASA astronaut. So you've got a couple there. And that's really interesting because that's a very elite group of people who have flown in space already in orbit and also become astronauts. And it's not as short a list as I thought it was. You've got Imelda Muller. Oh, go ahead, Josh.
I was going to ask, have any astronauts, any new astronaut candidates already been to orbit before? I know some have been to space technically, but I don't think any have ever been to orbit.
No, yes. A lot of payload specialists who weren't official NASA astronauts would have gone to orbit for their payload and then later joined NASA over time. Robert Perlman at Collect Space, our friend of the show, gave me like a whole list. There's like 6 or 7 of them, if not more. I was really surprised. It was a longer list than I thought. But just to round out the new astronauts, you got Imelda Muller, from Copake Falls, New York. Again, another Navy officer, an undersea medical officer, one of two with men and medical folks who were on the crew or in the group. Erin Overcash, which is an awesome astronaut name. Isn't that awesome? Lieutenant Commander in the U.S. Navy, and she's a test pilot as well. And Catherine Spies of San Diego, a chemical engineer by training from the University of Southern California. Fight on, Catherine! And she is the only Marine Corps pilot, and one of two helicopter pilots in this group. A very exciting, very very interesting mix of folks. These are going to be the astronauts who can form the core of not just trips to the moon, but private space stations, maybe even Mars, which I think is the biggest target that they got for this.
Well, none of those names are as cool as Scott McCloud of Space Angels with the eye patch, but I'll take what we can get.
Brent Jett, remember Brent Jett in the Shuttle Commander? Right? That's an awesome name too.
So you had a big sigh moment. Why was that?
Well, actually, before that, I don't want to step on it, but before that, Josh talked to Lauren Edgar, and I'd love to get Josh your thoughts on Lauren's path to space to kind of give us an idea of who she was. She was the only one of these 10 astronauts that we got to talk to in person.
So I think it was very cool that we got to talk to Dr. Edgar, Lauren. She is maybe the longest standing NASA employee of the bunch. She's been working on Mars rovers and Mars geology and NASA science for 17 years, so almost 2 decades. And I think just on its own, the initial dream of every kid who wants to be an astronaut, everyone thinks the path to that is, if I get to work at NASA, maybe, one day I'll get all the way up to space. And she's done that. And I think it's really interesting that she was able to, take her field of study, geology, which when one thinks of geology, you don't necessarily think of space. You think astronomy, astrophysics, but geology, that's Earth. But all the geology she's been doing at NASA has been Mars rocks, moon rocks, the Mars rovers and the science they're doing, the science that Artemis II astronauts will do when they get to the moon and on the moon. And so I think it was a very interesting conversation with her, just to be able to hear her passion for geology. What's that, Tariq?
Tell them the fun fact about Lauren Edgar.
Oh, she, I think she said at least once a day, or at least extremely often, she walks on her hands.
She likes to do handstands everywhere.
Yeah.
So that'll be fun to see if she does one on the moon, I got to say. So, yeah, my big sign
would be a feat.
My big sign moment was there was a lot of politics in the announcement for the astronauts. There was no escaping the second space race with China. We heard that throughout the week about why it's important to get back to the moon and that this new astronaut corps is really important for that. We heard it from Sean Duffy, acting NASA administrator who was there, and he once again said that he'll be damned if China beats the United States back to the moon. I guess that last comment when he said it a few weeks ago went over quite well, so he's been repeating it where he can. He also said, and this is the part that really kind of got to me, because he's talking about how they selected the best and the brightest, and then he said the best looking people, which is just it felt a little gratuitous to say, to add in, you do it for the laugh.
See, that's not sexist. What would that be? Looksist?
Well,
I
have a take, if I may.
Yeah.
Commenting on the astronauts' looks, being, I think, taboo already as it is. One glaring fact about this astronaut class that I think sets it apart from other recent astronaut classes is its demographic base. It is almost entirely white people. And, I think that if you're talking about the astronauts' looks, is pretty significant. And then to comment, not on that aspect of their looks, but to comment on their looks at all on top of that fact as they're all sitting before the gathered crowd, I thought was very notable.
Yeah, and for our viewers, the initial speaker, that's a former astronaut. Nicole Ayers is a former astronaut class graduate and a current NASA astronaut, but she's talking and introducing and interviewing the rest of the team. You can see them in the seats there. So, yeah,
Also,
that's a really good point.
No international astronauts either.
No internet. That is a departure. Usually, you have some international partners, but you could see that they really wanted to make sure that they've got the U.S. represented. So,
Well, by golly, fingers crossed that this happens on a timely schedule and that we all get to see it go and we all get to see him come back. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for episode number 179 that we like to call the new crew, the good-looking new crew. Josh, is there anywhere other than space.com we should be looking for your work online?
No, all my writing can be found on space.com right now. My launch photography and other photography, mostly of my dog, can be found on the various social medias. I am at Josh Dinner. Dinner's just like the meal. And you can, I guess, find my posts of rockets and haikus.
All right. Tariq, as always, where can we keep up with your matters that matter?
Well, no one can keep up with me, Rod, but you are all invited to try. You can find me at space.com, as always, on X and everywhere else at Tariq J. Malik. This weekend, if you are in Pennsylvania, you might find me in Bethlehem at the Cake concert. And if you are, say hello and let me know your favorite Cake song.
Is Cake a group?
It's a band.
Cake is a band.
Out of Sacramento. Okay. Short skirt, long jacket. Right?
Wow. Okay. Because the best things of life come from Sacramento. And of course, you can find me at pilebooks.com or at astromagazine.com or apparently on a rocking chair on the porch of the old folks' home. Remember, you can always drop us a line at twit@twit.tv. We welcome your comments, suggestions, and ideas. And we answer each and every email, even the ones that aren't nice, which fortunately is extremely rare. New episodes published every Friday on your favorite podcatcher, so make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, and give us reviews. We'll take whatever kind of review you want to give us. Hopefully it'll be at least 5 of something. And Tariq, I know what you're thinking. I won't go there. But we thank you in advance, and you can also head to our website at twit.tv/twists. Last thing, don't forget, we're counting on you to join Club Twit in 2025. Besides supporting our wonderful show and our hideous space jokes, you'll help keep the Twit network on the air. And this is something that benefits all of us because there's a lot of good work going on here. Of course, we like to think our podcast is the best one, but there's a lot of them and they're all really good. So $10 a month. I ask you, gentlemen, what can you get that's more fun than the Fist for $10 a month?
Not even a movie, let alone if you want popcorn.
There's other stuff, but it's much more expensive. So thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Tariq. And we'll see you next week.
From Silicon Valley boardrooms to tomorrow's AI breakthroughs, if you need to keep up to date with tech, you need twit.tv. At Twit, we're tech experts who understand what's happening and can keep you in the loop. And we do it in a thoughtful, informed, and fun way. Start your Sundays with This Week in Tech, a roundtable of tech journalists and people in the know with a rundown of the week's most important tech news. But that's not all. All week long, you can stay ahead of security threats with Steve Gibson and Security Now. Keep up on all things Apple with Mac Break Weekly. Listen to the most informed Microsoft experts in the world with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell on Windows Weekly. Our flagship shows feature tech's most respected voices, giving you the insight you need to understand and benefit from the changing world of technology. We give you analysis you won't find anywhere else, so you can make smarter business decisions and take advantage of the technologies transforming your world. Whether you're a CEO, IT professional, or simply passionate about technology, Twit's network of shows gives you the edge you need in today's digital landscape. Don't miss a minute. Subscribe to twit.tv today.